All right. Today we're going to talk about the president's role as chief executive and the president's role as salesperson in chief. Okay, so starting with chief executive, the executive branch is more than just the president and the vice president. The executive branch is actually the largest employer in the United States. The federal government is huge. They are responsible for things like the Postal Service, and national defense, and highways, and just a number of things. And they're all broken down in departments, and you'll read about that when you read about your the bureaucracy, which is chapter 14. But the president is in charge of all that. This is a very important power for the president because that's how the president gets stuff done. The president is able to direct the executive branch, all of it, to do things. So the president has cabinet members: Secretary of State, Defense, Education, Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, Veterans Affairs, so on and so forth. All those cabinet members are in charge of entire networks of bureaucracy underneath them, and the president gives them direction. So what the president wants, the president then, tells their department chief, the secretary, do that, and then that gets done, more or less. When we talk about the bureaucracy, we'll talk about ways in which that kind of fails, or some checks against that. Notably, the two checks against that are legislative oversight and the fact that bureaucratic agencies kind of have their own mind sometimes, because they care more about the job than they do about politics, whereas the president is a politician primarily. But the president is the chief executive. The president can get stuff done without Congress if need be. Each branch, each cabinet has a existing budget, and within the bounds of that budget, the president can direct the money one way or another to do whatever they want. So that's really important, that the president is this chief executive. And that's how we get executive orders. What an executive order is basically the president signs a document saying something will happen. And it works like a law. It looks like a law. It smells like a law. It talks like a law. It quacks like a law. But it's not a law. It carries the weight of law, and you can be fined and or put in jail for violating executive orders. However, they are temporary. First of all, executive orders are weaker than laws in two ways. One, that a law can override an executive order automatically. If you write a law and it competes with an executive order, the law wins. The executive order goes bye-bye. Second, more importantly, executive orders are by a president, and presidents last at most 8 years. And the next president has the opportunity to, with the stroke of a pen, undo that executive order. Whereas laws, once a law is passed, Congress has to write a new law, pass it, get the president to sign it for it to overwrite the old law. So if the president makes an executive order about, I don't know, let's say in the last days of the Obama administration, he passed an executive order about polluting rivers, mining companies polluting rivers, that they can't do it, and the new regulations on it. And then Obama leaves office, and a couple months later, Trump walks in and signs an executive order undoing that. That happened. So that executive order lasted a couple months at maximum. And so that's kind of the downside of executive orders. But they are a good way for the president to get things done without having to deal with Congress. On the AP test, we've talked about Congress before, and we've talked about, like, on any question on the AP test that says, what can Congress do about whatever's going on? And the answer is always make a law, or legislative oversight, if you want. Those are your two options. For the president, if there's a situation and they're like, how can the president do X, Y, or Z, the answer is always going to be executive order. Especially if the question says, how can the president implement policy without the help of Congress? Executive order is the answer. The other way in which presidents can make policy, or at least encourage policy to be made, because a lot of times on the AP test, and this is really important actually, so pay attention to this. What the AP test really, I've noticed, does typically is, instead of asking you, like, tell me everything you know about the president, or tell me everything you know about Congress, or whatever, what they'll actually do is they will give you a scenario, and they'll say, what can Congress do about this? What can the president do about this? And then the question, the way they word it, will ask you to kind of talk about the coordination or conflict between, say, the executive and Congress, or the president and states, or whatever. And it's more than just checks and balances. It's more like, how can the president and Congress work together to do a thing, or how can the president implement policy on their own, given what Congress's powers are? And so then what the president will have to do is, and the answer is executive order, because Congress can't really deal with that without making a law. So anyway, so the next power is salesperson in chief. Salesperson in chief is, it's not an official power. It's not anything that, like, you'll find in the Constitution or anything like that, but it is an important power. The president is responsible for selling the federal government and what they're trying to do to the American people. If the Department of Defense recommends to the president that a war or a military conflict is necessary, the president has to sell it to the American people and get them to buy in, because the American people don't support the president. The thing's not going to happen. The president can't, for very long, do things without the support of the American people, and neither can Congress. But the advantage that the president has over Congress is the president is one person whose face is universally recognizable, who, when they want to talk on TV or on the internet, they can. Congress doesn't have that power. We call this the power of the pulpit. Make note of this, because it has been on the AP test before. These exact words. Power of the pulpit. It means that the president has the ability. If the president, in the White House, there's a whole room that is just reporters who work there. They don't go to the office, they go to the White House, and they work from the White House every day. And so all the president has to do is walk down the hall and say, you know what, I want to talk to the American people. And the president's got, tens of cameras in front of them immediately. Whenever the president goes out in public, there's cameras, and they can say whatever they want. And a lot of times the president, and this president in particular, uses that power to try to relay their message to the American people. And the American people get that message more frequently, more clearly from one voice than if Congress were to try to do it. So the president has that power. And so if Congress and the president are conflicted over a bill, the president has the advantage when it comes to going to the American people, because the president can go on camera and explain to the American people why Congress is being lame, and why everyone should see things the way that the president sees it. And that's a huge advantage, because it can sway public opinion in the favor of the president against Congress. And that's, again, really important. So that's another one you'll see on the AP test, like, what is something the president can do with a hostile Congress? And the answer is appeal to the American people, because Congress can't do that. And with enough pressure, if the president does it enough and people believe it enough, then that's they can get what they want. There have been several times with this particular president, Trump, where a Republican congressman has stood up and opposed the president. And if you'll notice, almost every single time that's happened, that particular congressperson doesn't have a job anymore. Because the president has the ability to go to the American people, and this president uses the power of the pulpit through Twitter mostly. But that's a really powerful thing in shaping public opinion. And so these are the two things that kind of the president can do when faced with a Congress that's not doing what the president wants. Executive orders to bypass Congress, power of the pulpit, go to the American people to convince the American people to pressure Congress to make that law. And Congress will eventually make the law if the president's powerful. Look at Franklin Roosevelt, because the Congress people don't want to lose their jobs. And if they think they're going to lose their job because the president's mad at them and the voters are going to side with the president, they'll do what the president wants. So these are two really important powers.